The problem. There are lots of AI tools. Everybody's talking about new ones. If you're on Twitter or LinkedIn, everyone's talking about the latest thing you need to get access to, how they're automating their whole business with AI, all of these things. But how are you supposed to navigate all of that? Everything's constantly changing, and sometimes you only have access to one tool. So it's a really complex time to be figuring out AI in, and so that's what we're here to hopefully help you with, to break things down to very simple and easy ways to understand how to use AI that actually benefits you and saves you time, and how you're able to do more with the time you have by using these AI tools in a way that actually benefit you and increase your productivity and allow you to produce more. So today we're going to be covering kind of this major shift. Instead of AI fully replacing your work, it's meant to supplement your work. So you're still in charge of thinking and really incorporating that judgment piece into your work. While AI can kind of do that 80% of the work that's maybe boring, mundane, a little more process oriented, but it's critical for you still to be in the loop as needed so that it's not obviously an AI output. We don't want your work to become just, prompting an AI, copying the output and submitting it. That's not what this is all about. It's more about finding those pieces in your day-to-day that you can rely on AI, you can guide it in the right way so it produces a trustworthy output, and you can actually just get more work done at the end of the day.
What a great point. And do you hear me?
Yes,
If we could stay on there, and if you don't mind if I jump in, I'm just having a little
go
trouble with
ahead.
my video still, but if you hear me, um, what a critical point about, now we have to manage the AI. We have to manage a whole new level of work that's being produced. And if you go back just a couple years in the before times, we used to log into documents and slides and web browsers and think and type. And boy, that was hard, right? And then these chatbots came out that you put them off to the side as you're doing your work. They're kind of a co-pilot, right? You're asking questions, and then all of a sudden you started to be able to just ask them to do work for you, create this document, write this email. And now they're going so far beyond that, right? So it's created this new challenge of the way that work works is fundamentally changing, right? I mean, you used to focus on doing a lot of the tasks, and now everyone's job, everyone in the entire organization, it's shifting toward planning work and learning how to manage it and gauge the output. And sometimes that feels kind of like drinking out of a fire hose.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to cover the
So,
agenda, Jay?
yeah, yeah. So, given that, all these changes, we wanted to just step back and give you our view of how things have evolved and what the best practices are right now. There's a ton of tools out there. We want to tell you which ones we gravitate to and why. And then we want to run through for points 2 and 3 there, a couple real examples of how we do it in practice. And we'll kind of try to tie a thread through the whole presentation as we go. Okay. So, what I guess before November 2022, these screens didn't exist. We didn't know what these looked like. These weren't a thing in our head, right? We all knew what Google looked like and so forth. But then all of a sudden, ChatGPT came out. And now here we are about 4 years later, three and a half, I guess. Um, and this is kind of the way things have evolved. This is how they look. You go into a screen on the left-hand side, you see a list of, a couple menu items, but then usually a list of chats, which we have blurred out here on the left. And then on the right-hand side, you have a chat input with maybe a couple other widgets, right? And one of the points we wanted to make on this slide, if you look at that middle section there, is while all of these chatbots have evolved to have a very similar UX, which is good in a way, right? Because you can be somewhat portable and you can move your methods around. There is a lot of nuance that really matters right now whenever you get into picking what model you're using and the thinking level. And if anybody on this call isn't totally comfortable with what models to use and thinking levels and so forth, hit us up, well, either on this webinar afterward or email us. We're more than happy to give you our opinion. But it can really change the quality of the output that you get just by making a few tweaks there. We wanted to set the stage just by calling that out. Um, and just to step back a little further, you might be familiar with deep research functionality. Uh, Kind of came out maybe 2 years ago. It's really come a long way since then, and I think it's just kind of like a common thing that everybody does now. And that's actually our first example. You may or may not have heard of skills. Skills are kind of a new uh, it's a standard that the industry has adopted that's becoming portable across the different tools. And the second example we give is about skills. And then you're probably certainly familiar with web search and voice mode because they've rolled out those for a while. But you'll notice that you might trust one voice mode better than another or prefer the web search of a different platform. You really just have to use them to kind of see how it feels to you. So use the right tool for the right job, right? If you understand the landscape of what tools are available to you, then you could be a little more intentional about what tools you use when. The deep research example that we're going to give in 1 second, Anna's going to give you a real good explanation of how she thinks about deep research. Writing and voice, I don't know for the longest time, and I still feel it's the case. People tend to gravitate towards Claude for that, right? I know for skills and automation, I tend to use Claude, and then for data and analysis, I tend to use GPT. That's just me, right? I think there's probably some common patterns across people, but again, you really got to jump into multiple different versions, feel them out, and learn that nuance yourself.
Awesome. So now just diving into deep research. I'll give a quick overview of what everything is and then go into a live demo. So, starting off, what is deep research the old way? If you wanted to maybe in marketing do a competitive analysis on your company, you would have to, spend some time analyzing all these different sources, reading different pages, pulling out anything that's relevant, and then maybe at the end of the day, you were able to put a one pager together about what you learned. Now you can do that whole day's worth of work in just a matter of minutes with just sending a prompt into one of these tools with the deep research functionality on. It goes off, searches the web, does all this different PhD level research, and comes back to you in about 20 minutes or so with a structured report. And it has all its sources cited. It's very thorough and in depth, and it's something that we've come to fully trust as a resource that we use internally all the time. So personally, I was going to walk through this workflow that I've developed anytime I'm doing deep research, and I would say I use this definitely on a weekly basis, if not more. And it starts off by using voice mode. So I am not someone who necessarily loves using voice mode for the random conversations, but I think this is a great use of voice mode. You can really talk to your favorite voice mode. I prefer ChatGPT about what you're planning on researching and what your desired output is, any kind of nuance you're looking for in this research. And it kind of feels like a conversation with a coworker versus sometimes I find it harder to, in a prompt, think through all the bullets you want covered. So this is a good way to kind of make it feel a little bit more natural and just another AI capability that I think is worth taking advantage of.
If
The
I could chime
second,
in there,
yeah, go ahead.
it's a critical point. I mean, before, if you hadn't had your coffee yet for the day and it just wasn't working, too bad, right? That in the old way. Now, whether you're using voice mode or not, you can almost just kind of mumble a half idea out and then just ask it like, "Hey, talk that through with me. Help you ask me questions to flesh that idea out." Right. And you'll feel it. It takes so much mental burden off of you pushing through that process, having it pull you through it. And all you have to do is be like, pull me through the process, ask questions, right? It's so easy. And then I don't know, even for me, I notice it's time of day. At night, I don't like to type. It's harder. I can talk to the thing though, and then I prepare prompts and things for the next day. So experiment with it. Great point,
Yeah,
Anna.
absolutely. But that leads into the second point of having it interview you, give it the general picture of what you might want, but then before finalizing anything, ask it what it's unclear about, anything that you haven't necessarily clarified. And it really gets you to think through those points that maybe you wouldn't have considered if it was just you writing this prompt on your own. Then from there, I always like to have it write my deep research prompts. It knows the structure well, it knows what works best, and it does a really good job of synthesizing that whole conversation that we just had on voice mode and making sure to include all those details into a really thorough prompt. And sometimes prompts can be multiple pages worth, so I think it does a great job at that. And then finally, I like to use at least two different models to actually run my deep research. Typically, I use ChatGPT and Claude for this example, I also included Gemini as well. But it's really interesting to take a look at what those different models will pull out, how they run, where some of the accuracy differs, what kind of sources they're pulling from. So it kind of just ultimately will be a gut feeling that you have of, oh, I really love Claude's deep research, or I like ChatGPT for these certain use cases. So it's always cool to see if you have access to multiple models, testing them out and really understanding how they work for you. So now diving into this live report. So what I had prepared was I did the same deep research prompt across three models, Claude, ChatGPT, and Gemini. And then I used Claude to actually mock up this dashboard that shows the comparison of the three. And this was done in a one-shot prompt. I think it's a really cool use of AI as well to take so much data and synthesize it super visually and just I can understand what's going on in a quick glance. So it really shows how all of these different models performed based off accuracy, depth, nuance. It shows the word count, sources cited across these different models. And so this is a super cool look into how they perform on this deep research functionality. So something to note here, and this is probably why I don't use Gemini personally for deep research, but it had some six issues where it was pulling sources that were outdated, whereas Claude and ChatGPT was able to find the most up-to-date research. So just things like that. That's why I think it's always a good idea to run your deep research across different models and compare results. Also, in this tool, it was able to pull up what was found across all three. That means it's probably highly credible, can go ahead with the research versus just areas to consider where they might disagree. And these could lead to further deep research prompts that you might run if there's an area of interest. So we can really just spiral with what comes out of this original research. So I just wanted to show that quick before jumping back in. But yeah, so now segueing from this whole concept of deep research, we're going to talk about skills and workflows. And Jay, you can go ahead and take it from there.
Thanks, Anna. So before we do, let's just pause and let's think about what she just went through and the implications of it, right? 3 or 4 years ago, we used to do a number of like little deep research projects for our clients as part of marketing work. And I remember we'd spend, several hundred to maybe $1,000 for like one of these little reports with the people we worked with. Super good quality. And again, we'd work it into a lot of our marketing strategy. When deep research came out, I think maybe 2 years ago, we did a lot of side by side comparisons. And the deep research reports, I mean, we went and validated all of this stuff manually just to make sure at first. They were better quality than the reports we were buying, and they averaged $2 to $4 a piece. That was like the first time when we realized, like, oh wow, that this is a real thing. These are things that we sell essentially, right? Or factor into the things we sell. Um, and that's not an incremental improvement. That's an order of magnitude or two, right? So that's one deep research report. Now, fast forward to today, and Anna tells you, well, I know that you have this magical tool where I could type in a prompt and get the research report and make it 200 or $2 instead of $500, but I don't feel like doing that. So I'm just going to talk to this magic genie in my phone about what I want. And then whenever it pulls all of the information out of me because I'm too tired, I'm just going to ask it to write the prompt for me and run the prompt for me, right? So she's condensed what? Hundreds of dollars and many hours down to just a few lightweight minutes that could have happened on a walk in the morning, right? Okay, so she did that for three platforms. And then she takes those three and puts them in a folder and then goes to Claude, a different AI, and says, hey, I need to figure out which of these is the best deep research report in general. Go analyze all of it, which is another hours and hours of analysis, right? And then build me a custom dashboard that enables me to navigate through that data. This is the kind of stuff that, and this is what I mean, but we have to change the way we think about working. This stuff wasn't feasible to even consider a couple years ago. You wouldn't think, oh, for this little, this thing I did on my morning walk, I need my IT team and data science team to get involved and do this analysis. And it just wasn't possible. So we're encouraging everyone we talk to and trying to give all these little examples, all these different angles to say, okay, like how creative can you be? How can you apply this to your workflow? Um, which I guess is a great segue into the slide.
Yep.
We mentioned skills. Uh, it's skills with a capital S, meaning it's a standard that is being adopted across the board. You'll notice some of the online platforms allow them, or you can put them into them. It's more common, I think, on the desktop platforms right now, like Cowork and Codex. And what's going on here is, the prompt. We've all felt it, where whenever we were learning how to use ChatGPT, you kind of get into a couple patterns that work really well for you. And then you start to copy and paste your prompts into your notes, where you have some like plugin to store prompts and substitute values and whatnot, right? But it was a repeating thing. Um, and then as the chatbots turn more into agents, which simply means that you're not just chatting, it means when you say something to them, they have the ability to think a little bit and then take actions, like read documents, look at emails, send emails, etc. Um, it became a little more tedious to keep reprompting all of those chains over and over. So we can encapsulate an entire workflow, even if it could be one prompt if you want, but you could also have like a several step workflow, like several prompts that you would have run in a row and piped the data from, one to the next. You can encapsulate that all in a skill, which in its most basic form is a single file, a markdown file. If you don't know what markdown is, you should email us or ask after this uh, that you can then put into your AI and then kind of call that command as you need it. A lot of times it's like a slash command, right? So we're going to give an example in a second um, that shows you how we took a process that we do internally, turned it into a skill, and now have the ability to run it over and over and over at practically no cost. And the key point here on the right-hand side, those two italics, the two words in italics, it's repeatable and consistent, right? I said in the most basic level, the skills are just a file that kind of has all your prompts. There's a little extra functionality too that helps these things stay on track, evaluate their output, and actually get better over time in some cases. So if you're not using skills, please this week go into one of the chatbots that supports it and say, "Hey, I need to make a skill. Help me make my first one." That's all I'm asking you to do, and your life will be changed. Be good to okay, yeah. Here's the example for us, and I'll tie it back to last week's webinar. We're a marketing firm. We do a lot of all the different aspects of digital marketing, one of which is SEO. I've done SEO for forever. And I was always one of those people who said SEO hasn't changed, right? Ever since the 90s, Google said just make good content and tell people about it and we'll find it. There's no tricks. And it was the same game for 20 years. I really mean it. Then with ChatGPT and now all the other platforms that are coming out, it really has changed. And what I mean by that is it used to be one search surface, Google. Everyone goes to Google. No one went to Bing. No one went to, I don't know, other search engines, right? I mean, that's the whole point. Um, Now people go to ChatGPT. People go to Claude. Ask my team. I tell them every other week, we're using Claude this week. We're using ChatGPT. I need people to go test Perplexity, right? I mean, it's all these different things have really good reasons to use them. And boy, it's a good fight in the market right now, right? At one moment, it looks like someone's going to win, and the next month, it looks like someone else is going to win. And our best advice is probably you need to be using ChatGPT and Claude, um, if not more. But I think that the end result of that when it comes to being found in a marketing sense today is that it's not just Google. People are going to be coming through all these different channels, which leads you to think, okay, well, how do we get found? Right. So now the advice for how to be found in AI is a little different than what we've traditionally been saying for SEO. And I think to boil it down, just to tie it back to last week, one of the huge angles or the huge factors is brand mentions. You want your brand to be mentioned all over the web, and you need a system in place to make sure that happens. But that's kind of not what we're talking about today, right? What we're talking about to tie this all together is uh, going a little deeper with your research when doing your content creation and page planning, right? So, given that you have that deep research skill, um, which think about that, you could make as many skills as you want that do deep research whenever you find the types of deep research you want to do, which is kind of this, right? This is us saying, hey, we want to make this page rank in AI. So let's do really deep research on what people are actually looking for at a very nuanced level, right? It's not just keyword search like kind of SEO used to be. Now the bots are able, because they're able to do the deep research themselves and click into the results and go and get the actual answers that people want. You can't just put a bunch of general information out, right? You need to have information that shows that you have a thorough understanding of what your target market cares about. That means you need to mine their discussions. You need to mine your internal data. You need to have discussions with your customers and you need to find a way to turn that into content on your website, right? So this is tough. It's tough when you have to get a bunch of subject matter experts involved and then go do a big project to change a bunch of web pages. But it makes it a little easier when you have a skill like this. What this skill does, it's a first pass at one page on a site, given everything I just said. It takes the page, it reads it, it thinks, what kind of deep research would I do to understand what this target market thinks about it? It does that deep research. It comes back and does a gap analysis with what's on your current site, and then it makes suggestions for ways that you could change it, not random suggestions, suggestions that we've curated based on our domain knowledge to say these are the types of changes you should make on the page to make it rank higher. Right now, to and we could probably jump ahead because you're going to show one, right?
Yep. Yeah. So if anyone's interested, we can run your site live right now. If you just want to drop your link in the chat, I can go ahead and copy that over to Claude. But basically, how the skill works is this is just my Claude. I would go backslash AI reframe page for AI search. This is the skill. We can send instructions in a follow-up email. With all the setup instructions of how to access skills in Claude and everything like that. But let me see. Okay, we got some in the chat. So we'll go ahead and run this one. Also here I have the choices. I could run the different efforts in terms of how much this model
Hey,
will think.
talk through it. What goes through your head when you're picking that right now?
So
All
this
things
looks like
considered.
to be just a home page. I think if I were to actually be running this and wanting to make changes to my site, I would probably go page by page. And then probably go with one of like the higher max effort models. I think for time's sake, it's gonna take a bit longer to do that. So for this webinar, we'll probably just go with the medium effort just to keep it concise. But yeah, it's also something interesting. It'd be cool to test out, running one on super low thinking mode and seeing what kind of things get pulled out versus on the Pro Max version and
And
compare.
if you did that, sorry, if you did that, you could take them into Claude and say, make me a dashboard that compares these two and give me an analysis on the real difference, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and just to kind of like further make this point, this type of work would be, it would be 3 hours per report, and the reports would be worse quality than what this is doing. And right before this webinar, like I was rushing at like 56, 11:56, I got 4 of these started for a client that we're working on later today, right? And like we try to make kind of a lot of points on a lot of different levels here, but it's almost I don't know if it's a good analogy, but I always say it's like cooking a big meal. And I don't know how to cook and I'm not a chef, so maybe it's a bad analogy, right? But you got to know when to start each piece. You have to time things appropriately such that something finishes at the right time and then, you add something else or mix it together. You need to think about work like that too, right? So in the 10 minutes before this, as I made a cup of coffee, I thought, oh, I could get these 4 off. And like, they're probably done now. I won't check, but think of how much work you can get done just with a little thinking ahead now.
Right. Yeah, so this looks like it's running it did a first kind of read at the site and it uses these different dimensions to score against. These are all kind of covered in our last webinar, which was focused on SEO, AIO. We have a recording of that on our about that on our site if you want to go back and you missed it. But it kind of scores them, quick glance, shows where you should focus on improving. And now it's going to go through each more in depth, and you can click in and actually see all the sites it's looking at, all the research it's doing, and how many different sources it's going to be pulling from, which I think is super neat to see how thorough it is. But yeah. We have one complete. Jay, do you want to jump over to the preloaded one just to,
Yeah, sure thing.
yeah.
Would
But
you
we
have it?
can, yes, we can
Okay.
send that one over after this webinar. But basically, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's worth a thorough read if this is your site, but kind of again shows that gap analysis, where you should kind of focus your attention in terms of what will make the most significant improvements. It actually shows the research prompt it used to do that deep research within the skill, which I think is really neat to read through, and you can see how it's organized, as well. Then there's, this is what Jay mentioned, really having questions on your site that directly tie to what your customers are searching for. So it gives you a list of questions that would be some things that maybe is worth including on your site, shows where the sources are from, how frequently they're getting searched, and if it's mentioned on your pages at all. So I think this is really neat. Also, any type of specific language that maybe you're missing on your site that your target audience is searching for, as well as all the evidence that should be maybe included, what sources this was pulled from.
I could chime in real quick.
Yeah.
The big thing that did change about SEO, and now we kind of call it AIO. Some people call it GEO for generative engine optimization. Um, if you think about it just kind of from the ground up, these chatbots read everything on the internet. So if it's content that's appeared elsewhere, they have it in their mind already. They don't need to go do a search, right? And if you remember the old days of SEO, it was like write a big 3,000 word ultimate guide on something, right? And it wasn't garbage. You couldn't just ChatGPT. You had to talk to the SMEs and write good content. But in many cases, it was a little more general and it still worked, right? That won't get you anywhere now. And these bots, what they're looking for is stuff they haven't seen before that looks credible, right? So that first part about looking for what people are talking about, if you can get into the minds of your customers by doing deep research on conversations they're having, like forums online or reviews online, that's going to give you a lot of insight into, how would we respond to that? Well, your answer, your natural answer is quite likely something that's only in your head, right? And that's content that the bots haven't seen. So put that on your website, right? But it can't just be a high level, what is X or Y question, right? Go the next level or two down. And the other key point here about citing evidence, these bots really love data that they can point to. Because think about it, when you're using a chatbot, the whole world is kind of thinking, can I trust this? So they're thinking, hey, we need to be able to show citations and prove to people that this is coming from real data. So they're very hungry for that real data. Now, if you can put that real data on your website and then format it in tables, in charts, in all the different ways you can, that's going to give you an edge too. So this skill will kind of step back and say, hey, here's a couple ideas for you to consider when, updating this website.
Yeah. So the final section is just the recommended updates and prioritize, and it's very in depth. So I think it's worth a run for your personal site. We'll send that again after the webinar and with instructions on how to use it. But now to just wrap us up, Jay, do you want to talk about everything we've discussed today?
I will, and I want to hit on that point five for like the fifth time again. And I'm just teeing that up because it is so important. But to run through it, there's a lot of tools out there. If you're not familiar with them, give yourself 20 minutes. And again, how to do it, go to any one of them and say, help me understand the different AI tools, right? Like every chance you get, offload the thinking to the bot. Um, you know what? I'm just going to reinforce the endpoint again because there's a phrase we've been saying internally. You can outsource thinking now. You can't outsource understanding, right? And like getting back to that list of recommendations. Actually, can we pull that up again?
Yes.
Because this is the critical point here, and we really felt it over the last year. Um, Boy, is it tempting to just send the output of AI, isn't it? You get this feeling of like, oh man, that used to take me 2 hours, and now it took me 2 minutes, and you just feel so free, right? And it's probably good. And until it's not, until you send something to somebody and like they say, what's this number? Where'd this number come from? And you're like, oh, well, got me, right? You don't want to be in that position. You can't be in that position. And that's almost like a funny thing up to now. Now it's actually one of the main problems with scaling AI in an organization, right? How do you trust it? If it's one person using a chatbot, it's easy for them to get a gut feel into what they trust, right? But how do you manage an organization of hundreds or thousands of people, knowing that they're all going to be having varying, levels of tolerance for that? How do you systematize it? Um, that's a chat for a different day. But the point I'm trying to make here is these are recommendations, these are suggestions. It did so much work for you, it did all the thinking. It didn't do the understanding for you, right? Just because it output it doesn't mean it put it in your head. So that doesn't just mean make sure you read all of the outputs when you are nice and awake. Because when you do that enough, you're going to get tired of it. It means design your prompts and your output such that it does all the work it needs, but also gives you a manageable chunk to review afterward, right? We're really feeling that right now internally because we got to the point where it's just too much to review. And you can't let the quality slip. And the minute you let one wrong thing goes through, then people are going to be questioning it. What do you just send the output of stuff? So take the extra 20 minutes. You're still saving a ton of time.
Yeah,
But yeah,
great
that's
point.
a I've sufficiently made that point like 8 times now. Okay, so pick the right tool and know that
Yep.
there is reason to pick different tools. There's nuance. Um,
Yeah.
oh
Well,
wait,
thank you guys. Oh, yeah, you had another point.
I guess I didn't. I skipped over the rest of them. Did
It's
I?
okay.
Let me
We'll
see.
we'll send this as a one pager as well in the follow-up.
Perfect.
But yeah, so we'll have more webinars, kind of different topics within using AI to work smarter. Coming up, our next one is about creative assets, image generation, any type of creative content. That one's on September 1st, same time. If you want to pre-register, you can drop your email in the chat right now and we'll sign you up for that. We'll also follow up this webinar with that AI content reframing tool, as well as you can just look on our website, poizd.com/resources to download that skill, previous skills, which are previous webinars, anything like that. But now we'll jump into some Q&A. If anyone's interested, feel free to come off mute or just drop a question in the chat as well. Either one works.
Yeah, I had a question. The ability to go out and look at all the chats and everything, I kind of looked at the different sources. So it's going out and looking at Reddit, looking at Facebook, or all those things where your clientele are talking. I mean, do you prompt it as to where to go based on who your target customer is, or does it just go out and blanket look for everyone?
I would recommend telling it where to look if you have some guidance. Something we do a lot is make a distinction between like actual discussions, forums, like the actual people in the target audience saying things versus industry publications, which are credible in a different way.
Yeah.
Uh, and they will follow your guidance to the most part. And one thought is you could preface that deep research with a prompt or deep research on, hey, what kind of sources are available? Help me prioritize.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. It's all about context AI. You probably heard that. And Martin's question, I mean, that he's essentially saying, can you change the context? You have control over the context. So yeah, you do, and it will massively change the output too.
Right.
I had a quick question. How do you, I guess, understand what you don't know? Because you mentioned that it does the thinking, but it doesn't do the understanding. But how do you know when you've understood everything that the AI has given you as an output, especially when you consider that like prompts and like output generation can be, many pages long? Um, yeah, how do you know when you've understood everything that has been given to you as an output?
If you can answer this question, you're a trillionaire. Uh, no, to the point about the length, that's what I said about designing your prompts. Don't let it give you too much that you don't want to read it, right? But that's kind of like the trivial side of it. I think, and this is just me thinking off the top of my head, it's almost like you can't You can't prompt it about stuff. You can't do research about stuff that you know nothing about, right? Because then how in the world would you gauge it? But if you're able to find that line of, okay, I understand this topic or this space enough that if you told me something pretty obviously dumb or off, it would at least feel off to me. I feel like you want to constantly be at that level. And that's that process of understanding, right? Like reading through it. And it, often what that results in is forking. You could branch chats or fork them, right? So a lot of time you'll be reading, I'll fork a chat, which copies the same chat you have and say, hey, wait a minute, that one thing you just said there, uh, help me understand it. And a really key point here is don't lead it. Don't say it means this, right? Or it's not that, is it? Just always be neutral because they tend to be a little, they over agree with you. So I don't know, try to balance that where it's you understand the core material, but it's forcing you to stretch as you go. Does that make sense? Is that helpful at all, Hunter?
It does make sense. I guess a follow-up question I have is you can hold yourself accountable as an individual, but like you said, the tolerances of each person will be different for what is considered intuition and what is like quote when the vote like vibes are quote unquote off. Um, how do you like standardize that across like a large company? Like let's say you do even if you have 5 employees, like how do you standardize like the individual tolerance for AI outputs?
It's another $1 trillion problem, dude. No, and the one word answer is evals. The world is trying to figure this out right now, man. It is such an interesting time. And what evals are, it's simply if I take this prompt or skill and I run it and I get this output, some mechanism to score that output, right? When a domain has very black and white, right or wrong output, for instance, computer programming, it either runs as the program or it does not run on your computer. That's easily verifiable, right? Those tasks were the first to be automated, as we've seen with coding. Now we're trying to figure that out with knowledge work, right? So I'll just give you a quick example. You know, well, in general, if you have something that produces an output, you could make another prompt or LLM check that output to at least try to flag things for you to speed up that process. But even then, you're not like fully signing off on it, right? So it's kind of like per case, per deliverable, per process. You need to understand what your personal tolerance is, not personal, but organization-wide tolerance is for that, and then have a system in place for ongoing monitoring and flagging whenever it's out of bounds.
Cool. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jay, one thought I have, and I'm not sure if this is relevant, but it's kind of how I look at things. We actually have a new employee in our company, and he's in the process of learning things. And he's getting a lot of data, and he's coming up with a lot of theories. And one of the keys in learning, I always go back to like the scientific method, if everyone's familiar with that, that scientific method, you create a theory based on what you learn, and which AI is kind of giving you theories. Then you have to challenge that theory and find out how can I disprove it or how can I prove it? So, as you read it, you got to say, well, what does this understanding mean? And if that's true, then this is true. Then have it do another research and say, is that true or is that false? And just kind of validate it that way. So you're kind of creating a theory, and then your job is to either prove it or disprove it to like validate that that theory and understanding is correct. And that's what I've been doing with this new employee as well. As I come up with a new theory, I go, well, if that's true, then what's this? So it's kind of like using a scientific method to try and determine is your understanding correct or not. And AI is really helpful in that because it can dig into a lot of data.
Yeah.
That's a wonderfully structured way to approach that thing that I just rambled through, Hunter. And you know what? This is a great skill. Think about that. You could make a skill. I challenge everyone to make a skill in the next week. But this would be a good one to start with, right? Say, hey, give me the ability to, after doing deep research or after answering a prompt, let me call out a few points and do that process with each one. Say for this, if that's the case, then this. If that's the case, then this, and then have it do a round and kind of just iterate over it, um, and feel the magic a little bit. Thanks,
Yeah.
Martin.
Another thought I had in terms of the understanding is I think a great way to check your understanding on things is if you're able to teach it to someone else, or if you're able to, talk about it in a way that someone else can understand what you're now explaining. And so I guess in our industry, Jay, we do a lot of work for clients. And so we have to get our understanding to the point that we're talking to clients who this is their industry expertise. They fully understand it. We have to understand the output of AI at that same level so we can hold conversations with them, guide their strategy, everything like that. So if you're able to run some deep research, understand it, challenge yourself by re-explaining that to someone else or teaching someone else what you learned, because I think that's a great check for yourself as well.
This never ends. You could just like go one. And my point there is, I was preparing for a client meeting once, and I just said, "Hey, make me flashcards." Right? I went into voice mode once, and I was just like, "I'm driving. Quiz me on the things that I prepared on." Right? So you can use all these different methods to just iteratively bake it into your head. It's like really unfortunate we don't have the plug yet that I guess Neuralink will have in a couple years, but until then, we're gonna have to do it the hard way.
Yeah, and just experimenting with different mediums as well. I know we had discussed like the length of the output. Like sometimes deep research can be 50 to 100 pages long. I'm probably not reading that. What you can do is have it break it down by topic and bullets, or if you're more of an audio learner, sometimes I'll convert those pages into podcasts and have it give me a summary that way. There's so many different forms nowadays, so really just finding out what works best for you and making sure that you're getting the most value out of what these tools are offering us.
Shame on us for not talking about Notebook LM on this. Everybody check out Notebook LM, more homework. Uh, no, no, for it's Gemini's what powers it. And I don't know, like in the space right now, you tend to feel like ChatGPT and Claude are the ones everybody goes to. Gemini for some specific use cases, maybe. However, Google does have some specific products, one of which is Notebook LM. They're really good. And to Anna's point, it's one that it lets you upload a bunch of sources, but then create kind of specific things like mind maps, podcasts, etc. Great for learning.
Yeah, another great tool to check out.
Yeah, to add on to the notebook LM abilities, you can also like take it so that it only uses like internal sources and doesn't like add anything new, so you don't have to worry about it like pulling information that you like didn't intend for.
Great point.
Sweet. Well, I hope everyone took something away from this. There'll be a recording afterwards sent in a follow-up email as well. We'll post the recording on our website. But stay tuned for our next webinar. If this was of interest to you, feel free to invite anyone that you feel might benefit from this and stay in touch with us. If you have any questions that we sparked or want to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out to either of us. And just again, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thanks, everybody.